Take your 4Drive's camp setup from this to this, and I did it in a day in the shed. Today, we're going to be installing a whole heap of big red lights onto the Mighty Pony. We've already installed spotties on it, so now it's time for some camp lights and some rock lights for night runs as well. Here are some of the basic tools and equipment you're going to need to tackle a job like this yourself. Most of these are basic tools that you'll probably have in your toolkit at home. There are a couple of specialty ones though, but you can grab them from your local hardware store. First things first, you want to find a good spot to mount your new camp lights. I'm thinking on the headboard of the canopy here underneath the awning, because then it'll shine down here where I put my swag. But it's one thing to think it's a good spot, it's another thing entirely to test. All right, it's not super dark in here, but this is just to give you a bit of an idea. So I've just got this plugged into a little 12-volt battery. And you can see here, yeah, that's a pretty good spot. If I come higher, how's that look? Yeah, back down here I reckon will be the go, and I want to sit behind the body enough that it protects the light. I've got the bigger light on the back here as a work light, and it's pretty bright, so it'll be a good search light. But I reckon I'm going to need to raise it up somehow so I can get a bit of swivel on it. Next up is the rock lights. Now, a bunch of people like to mount them up in the wheel well here to shine down on the top of your tyre, which would be good for if you're trying to find your vehicle at camp, or if you're working on the back of your vehicle and you take the tyre off, you've got a light there already to work on it. But I only use them so that I can see the tracks for rock packing and stuff, which means I want to put them in front of the tyre. So I'm just going to pop under here and think of a good spot. Yeah, that'll look pretty good. That'll be cool. The other thing I want to do is use some of these big red rock lights in the canopy, because it's a nice white light, so I'm just looking at a good spot to mount them. I'm thinking maybe on the passenger side I'll put one back here because it shines into like the luggage area, so I'll be able to see what I'm getting out a bit easier. And then on the other side I might put it on the opposite corner, so I have two on opposite ends, so it kind of spreads the light around the canopy. I reckon I've come up with a solution for mounting the rear work light. As I mentioned, I want to get it a bit higher than the sail track so I can swivel it around. And what I'm going to try is, this is an old valve spring out of my motorbike. So I thought I could mount the light on top of the spring like that, which will allow me to swivel it around like that. And then the other thing too is, if I hit it on the tracks or on the bush, if I hit a tree or something, hopefully the spring will take most of the force and it won't break the light, it'll bend. So here's to see if it'll work. I reckon might be all right, we'll see what happens. Now that I've figured out where I want to put the lights, it's time to mark and drill the mounting locations for each light. A little tip when drilling into any surface is to mark the hole with a center punch. This will prevent your drill from jumping all over the place. A handy tip when painting drilled holes is to use your partner's empty nail polish brush. A cotton bud also works well, or just give it a quick spray with a rattle can. We're moving along now. I'm going to make the wiring loom for the rock lights, and you'll notice that I'm using a little bit thicker cable than what the rock lights have, and the reason for that is they're going to travel a fair way up to the crank battery, and to avoid voltage drop you want to step up the cable size a little bit. These big red gear lights come with an active and earth lead off the back. You could add terminals here to join, but I like to solder and use heat shrink as it creates a nice reliable seal. The best way to do it, well, and what I've found anyway, it's quite important to get some solder on the tip before you start once it's heated up. I think it's called tinning the tip, but you basically just want to come underneath the wire, get some heat into it, and if the wire is the same gauge or if it's quite thin, it shouldn't take too long. It's important you also don't want to wrap the cable too tightly, because then it'll take a while to heat up and you don't want to get, or you want to ensure you get enough solder through. And there's probably some micro soldering experts out there or electrical engineers who are watching what I'm doing thinking you're a peanut, but the best way to learn this stuff is to just do it in the shed by yourself or with a couple of mates around. The other thing you want to do is make sure you use plenty of this heat shrink stuff. I've already slid a section I've needed along the cable, but a handy tip is slide it a fair way past what you're soldering, because once you heat that cable up, if your heat shrink's too close, you'll find sometimes you can already shrink the end of it and then you won't be able to get it on. Second to that, wait for it to cool before you try and slide the heat shrink on, because you'll find if you do it too quick, as you're trying to get it across the solder joint, it might shrink and then it'll get a bit stuck. If you're making your own loom, keep the cabling neat, appropriately sized, and fuse the loom as close to the battery as possible. Then cover over the top with split perforated tubing like this. On this rear light on the canopy, I've run a cable gland here to stop water getting in, and I've also added some automotive grade sealant to the fastener for the light to keep it sealed. When it comes to figuring out how much cable you need, always run more than you think you'll need so you can trim it at the other end. Once you figure out the path for your wiring, I like to run it from the light first and work my way forward, securing neatly with cable ties.
The lights are all mounted up, so next we're going to be mounting the switch wiring. Here is a diagram for switch wiring for a light via a relay. You can pause this video and take a screenshot so you can refer back to it later.
So now that we've got all the wiring for the rock lights in and they're mounted in place, we can connect them up to the relay and terminate these cables. So relays are pretty straightforward. Basically it'll allow you to run a switch in a circuit. You've got basically 4 little plugs you need to connect. You've got your main active, that'll be your fused power to your battery. So this one will run to the battery. Then you've got an earth to earth out the whole system. You've also got the input from all the rock lights will come onto one of these, and then the last one will go to the switch. That's pretty straightforward. 4 little connections on there. The relay's all in. I've just got to run a fuse power to the relay, and I've also just got to run the trigger wire to the switch. Now there's a couple of different ways to doing this. You could run more than one relay if you wanted to and use a switch to trigger them, or you could join the cables earlier if you didn't want to run all the cables into the one relay. I like doing it this way just because it keeps everything all compact and it minimizes how many joins are in the cable run. I've also run all the earths to the back here, and then I'm running a separate one out for earthing the relay, and the reason for that is earth issues are a common problem with aftermarket installs. So by ensuring that they all use the same earth, it means if I am having issues, it's easy to diagnose. Lastly, I've just got to run a fuse from the relay in line to the battery. When it comes to fusing, if you're not sure what the current draw of the accessory you're powering takes, fuse it to the cable. So for example, this is 15 amp cable, so I'm going to put a 15 amp fuse in. These lights will never draw as much as that, but it's just good to know. You could even go a little bit less if you wanted to for a safety margin, so 10, 15 amps should be okay. So now I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit more, and then I can run the fuse cabling, ground this out, and then run the trigger for the switch, and we should have rock lights. We've run all the wiring for the switch, but we still need to send power to the switch as well. There's 2 ways to do that. You can either find constant power, or you can find 12 volt selectable power. And the way you do that, so I've just got a cheap multimeter, and you want to come underneath the dash, and if you want your rock lights to be on all the time with the switch, so you can come up to the car, turn the switch on, and the rock lights will turn on even with the vehicle off, then you need to find 12 volt constant power for the switch. If you want it to be selectable with the key, so this switch will only work with the key in the on position, then you need to find a wire that has 12 volt active when the key's in the on position. So that's all I'm going to do here. I'm just going to stick my head under the dash, and I want to find a nice juicy wire that has 12 volts right when the key's in the on position. We also need to earth out the switch as well, but that's easy. There's a nice factory earth point under the kick panel here that I'm going to utilize, which will give us a nice strong earth. Tidying up your cable run, one thing I like to do is run along the cable and do up all the cable ties, and then come back through and cut the tails off. Now when you're cutting the tails off, don't cut them up here, don't leave a little bit on the end because it's sharp and you can cut your hands when you go in there next time and it's annoying. So get yourself some side cutters or some little cutters like this, and they're really good for cutting the tyre nice and flush, and then you won't have any dramas and your future hands will thank you for it. All right, how cool is that? So we've got a rear work light. Be interested to see if my little spring idea stands the test of time. I'll keep you updated. If not, I can always make a stronger mount, but I like the idea that I can swivel it. We've got canopy lighting on each side facing outwards for camping on that side, and then extra stuff over here. We've put some little big red rock lights inside the canopy for canopy lighting, and we've also mounted some rock lights underneath the chassis as well, pointing down at the tyres for some night wheeling. Now, the last thing to do is head out into the bush and test it. I can't wait. How unreal is this? This new lighting setup I've put in the Pony has made it so much easier to see at night, whether I'm around camp like right now, or I decide to go for a night run. And this light that's sitting on the valve spring at the back here has actually worked really well. I've beaten on the light and sprung back into place, but the fact I can move it around makes it real nice for when I'm working at the back of the vehicle. For more DIY tips and tricks, keep an eye on our channel. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.